That was dramatic, wasn't it?
Major countdown.
Let's see. Is it actually live in the event? It doesn't look like it.
Same as live there. You see it. Right.
We can really go unplugged if it's just us. This would be very fun. Let's really open it up.
No, we're live. It's on the stream. It's on the feed.
Okay, so it's in the event.
Hi, everybody.
Richard, you want to sing us a song or something?
Yeah. We're gonna do karaoke for the next 2 minutes here.
Okay, let's do this. Let me take you all off. We'll put on this for now.
Hey, there you go.
And then I'll have you all join in a bit. Rachel, you're stuck with me for a second.
No, this is awesome. Let's see.
All right, let's give it some time for a few folks to join. Looks like we're at a couple of folks trickling in.
Oh, you clicked that to join.
Okay, I don't think we're showing up in the event. So it looks like we're separate.
Yeah, I don't either. It looks like, so on my notifications, it says join Joseph's live video event. So hold on. Somehow we went live through that. And in the event, it says pre-live.
Yeah. We knew this was going to be interesting. So
maybe you should join the event, Stephanie.
1 minute. I am in the event.
Hey again, team. I see pre-live in my side too.
You see pre-live? Same thing.
Looks like Allie made it here though.
Yeah. Okay, let's see if I can figure out how to get it over to the other side. I don't know what else to do.
I'm seeing live in mine.
You see live in yours?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think somehow it's connected to Joseph's.
That's weird.
That is very strange.
Yeah, he went live. So maybe that's where we are.
Is this
now.
on your page, Joseph?
I'm seeing live on my page right now, yeah.
Yeah, so am I. There's 4
Hello,
people.
Joseph's friends.
Right? Thank you, Joseph. It says it's linked to mine in the side, but it says
Yeah.
that I'm
It
streaming.
seems that people are here, coming in here. I'm seeing some comments coming in. Yeah, you all see it too?
Yeah, I think they must be coming in through yours, Joseph.
So you're not
So-
seeing the comments. Should I, I don't know, what do you want me to do? Leave? Oh my God.
Yeah, I don't know if you can disconnect it from your side somehow.
I mean, I can leave. I mean, I can.
Well, no, I think you're doing it right. I see it on mine. So when I go to my LinkedIn profile, it shows that I'm live, and
Okay.
it shows all of us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But it's just not in the event.
Disconnect it from your side.
You got 26 people on yours, Stephanie. You're beating Joseph. He's only got 3.
We've just got a bunch of people joining live from different places.
I think we go ahead and start, Stephanie, and we'll have it as a. You guys can put the video asset somewhere afterwards on YouTube, maybe, if you wanted to, or if not, we'll just be on Stephanie's page.
Perfect. Sounds good. We'll go ahead and kick off. Well, thanks everyone for joining. Sorry for the technical issues as we've tried to figure out how to go live for the first time for this series. As you can see here on the slide, we've got a couple of panels coming up. So super excited to have the series going. So kicking off with software innovations and kind of the impact that software has had on people analytics. Next week, we'll have navigating the changing landscape of people analytics, where we'll share some of our results from our people analytics study that we've done about the layoff landscape. Then we'll have behind the title, so just kind of understanding all the different roles about people analytics and the different career paths people have taken to get to their success in the field. Then we'll talk about preparing for the future of work, and then lastly, just career pathways from novice to expert. So super excited to launch this series, People Analytics Unplugged, and kicking it off first with our software innovations. And so we've got Richard Rosno, we've got Joseph, and we've got Ian Cook here to chat with us from One Model, Equitable, and Vizier. I'm going to not do them justice by introducing them, so I'll have them introduce themselves briefly before we hop into some key questions. So Joseph, you are first on my screen. Over to you.
Right. Well, hi, Stephanie. Rachel, thanks for bringing this together, bringing myself, Richard, and Ian together for this. I'm Joseph. I am one of the co-founders and CEO of Equitable. And yeah, I'm really excited to chat today about people analytics, and yeah, looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Joseph. Over to you, Richard.
Good afternoon, everybody. Huge thank you to Stephanie and Rachel. This series is awesome already. I'm excited for it, excited to see what comes up. My name is Richard. I'm the Vice President of People Analytics Strategy over at One Model. I was a People Analytics practitioner for about a decade, had a project management career before that, and thrilled to be here at One Model now and getting to serve and support so many people in the People Analytics space.
Awesome. Ian, over to you.
Yeah, thanks, folks. I love the series because I think so much of the People Analytics community has been built from the ground up with just the energy and contribution of the community. So thank you, Rachel and Stephanie, for putting it on. I'm Ian Cook. I'm with Vizier. My current title is VP of Product, but my background is I'm a serial entrepreneur in the people data product building. So Vizier is my second company that I worked with, where we bring people data and we process it so that we can actually help HR perform what they do for the business better. This has been a fascination throughout my career for the last 20 plus years. So excited to join the panel and talk about where we're going.
Love it. Thanks, Ian. And so just going to dive right in. And so a lot of us have seen a lot of advances in this people analytics software space. So super excited to have the three of you to talk to us about it. And just as you think about all the emerging trends that you've seen and kind of what's had the most significant impact, and what will have the most significant impact over the next 5 years, how can organizations really prepare and leverage software to really drive change through people analytics? I will ask all of you that question. So whoever wants to jump in first, go for it.
Oh, that's a tricky one. I'm happy to jump in first. Is that okay with yourselves, Joseph and Richard?
Sounds good.
I'll promise to be succinct. So I think it's a fantastic question, Stephanie. It's one that we focus all the time. The way we answer it is what's happening for the business. I think technology for technology's sake is is the wrong way to think about it. So if we think about what's driving people analytics for the business, it is both scale and precision. So more personas looking for specific use cases for specific questions. One primary example we've got right now is understanding what's driving the changing cost. If you think about people, they're 80% of what your company spends often in a given year. So CFO, CEO supported by CHRO is like, what is it? Is it pay increases? Is it movement? Is it movement of people to places? Like, what is actually driving that change? And can we understand it and control it? And so that's not, can I make a dashboard of cost? It is, how do I actually answer that question? Very much primary use case. The other big driver that we know from our clients is scale. I just say it's one simple thing: scale. No longer is kind of people analytics the preserve of the kind of consulting few, or the concierge who live in the core of the business and distribute insight when they're asked. You have to have it operationally at scale so that a manager can answer a question when they need it. Again, generative AI is a very powerful tool for that. It's one of the few, but those would be the two really primary trends that we're seeing. I'll leave the floor for others. That's our start point.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I love that. Go ahead, Richard.
Sorry, Stephanie. I'll build on what you're saying there, Ian. I think two specific trends. I've got kind of a short-term one and a long-term one. I think kind of 1 year out, maybe 5 year out. I think one of the interesting things we're seeing, and I'm going to start out really negative. So that's the plan here. Is we start negative, we'll end on a high note by the end of this. I think the short term is we're seeing a bigger investment in machine learning operations. I think the negative side of that is the risk management profile is changing. We're seeing a lot more risk governance. We're seeing a lot more interest in ethics. I think some of that is the ChatGPT stuff finally hitting lawmakers, that they're starting to make the changes on some of this stuff we've always been doing in people analytics. But I think that era of I can do an algorithm on the side of my desk, I think that's over. I think we're going to see a lot more of this operationalization and productization of things, especially when it comes to algorithms. And really that regulatory environment, there is a positive there. And I'll borrow from our good friend Guru Satyapathy over at Fair Now. He talks a lot about when cars were invented, brakes got invented after, and when brakes got invented, those cars could go faster. I think we're going to see that within this space, where as that regulatory environment increases, we're going to see more things go to scale delivery. Let's talk a little bit long-term, though. I think long-term, really, HR becomes more human. I think there's something here, especially with these platforms that have come out. We've had platforms in this space for about, maybe the modern version, about 10 years. We kind of go back 30 years if you look at some of the other platforms. But really this space of, as HR lets go of some of the more technical things to the platforms, HR gets to be more strategic, gets to be more consultative, gets to be more human. And we're starting to see that already with some of the different things happening in like the ChatGPT world. I think in 5 years, we're going to see that sweep a lot of this stuff into the platforms themselves. And so in the long run, I think there's a really exciting movement where people analytics gets productized and we start to see a more human HR. So really excited about that too.
Awesome. No, those are amazing, amazing answers. I think for me, some of the things I've seen, similar to Richard, I think I want to give two sides of it. On one side, I think we've seen the whole AI and predictive analytics gain a lot of traction, but I actually don't think the impact is going to be as significant as we anticipated. I think partly because in HR as a whole, I think there is a lot of, and rightfully so, skepticism, human skepticism. And skepticism is interesting because to the extreme, it can be a drawback for innovation. But at the same time, having a healthy skepticism really maintains that sort of balance between sort of this algorithmic advancement and then human impact. So I think we will see growth, but we can't sort of remove the impact that micro societies and work as a micro society has, right? It has its own cultures, has its own norms. And so I think we can't really remove the complexity of that. So yes, I think you're going to see those changes in terms of optimization and all of that. But I don't think it's going to be like, because we're still waiting for flying cars from the Jetsons, right? And people said it was going to happen. So even 7 years ago, we are talking about robotic process automation. We're still talking about it today as well. So I think you're going to see those sort of changes in terms of optimization, but I personally don't think it's going to be as big of a jump. But on the other hand as well, yes, we've seen a lot of this, the push for AI and all of that stuff. But I think one of the things that would really be impactful is the move from, okay, I've seen my sort of my dashboards and my predictive, I mean, my descriptive analytics towards more of now the now what question. And so I think more organizations and more buyers, as their sort of their buying habits change, they're going to start asking more questions around, okay, yes, I've seen those things, but now what? Like, what are the recommendations? What are the steps I need to take? And so that shift essentially from being a systems of record to being a systems of decision is what is going to be the sort of that move essentially is what we see as what I see as the trend. So yeah, I can say that.
That's interesting. And as you all were talking, I was thinking, and this is not intended at all to be a sales plug, but really just curious as you work in your organizations, like what are some things you all are doing to address some of those trends within your companies?
So we will be general availability with a conversational bot in about 2 weeks. It's called V. You may have come across it. Specifically to the business problem, managers don't like going to dashboards. They don't like a destination. They have a question and they think of a question in a natural language. So our use of Gen AI turns that question into a query, which goes through our security model, hits our metadata, not the customer data, the metadata, the data about the data, and returns a natural language generated answer. So no hallucination in the loop. We've been trialing it for 6 months. We've been training it. Like we called the first version Baby V. We now feel like it's a young adult and well ready to step into the world. So it's going to be generally available. We see the scale and scope of access to insights, kind of Joseph's point. Like I need to make decisions and I need them fast and I need the information when I want it. It doesn't have to be a chart, doesn't have to be a dashboard I go to, it doesn't have to be a destination. In fact, it's in my Teams or in my Slack. So that for us is this, I mean, we've talked about democratization of people data for the longest time. Generative AI actually allows you not just to have access, but access in a way that you as a human, to Richard's point, like humanizing the process, as a human actually think about data.
Yeah. Anyone else?
Yeah. Misha just made a point, like you build it, they won't come. Dashboards, we know you build it, they won't come.
No, for sure. I think one of the things too we are doing on our side is, I mean, there's two things. In addition to doing something similar to what Ian talked about, but the two things we've done is, first of all, we're investing in the infrastructure because, of course, you can pull data from you can try and pull data from say, hey, what is my time to hire or what is my time to fill? But if you don't have the right data infrastructure, the right standardized data sets, I think you're just going to get garbage. And so one of the things we've done essentially is creating that robust infrastructure, the standardized data set, the data models, because again, we see AI as a messenger essentially, as a tool to get the actual data in the backend. So that's the first. And I think every organization, both vendors and internal teams, should be thinking about that and thinking about the same thing in terms of building the robust infrastructure. And the second thing we've done is investing in data literacy to ensure that effective utilization and interpretation. Because it's, I think it doesn't matter if you're able to pull the data from all these different sources. If it's misinterpreted, okay, well, how is it calculated? I have this particular metric. How is it calculated? How do I access the data definitions? I think that also builds trust internally. And so, yeah, we've built some conversational AI, and we're building towards the recommendation engine. However, one of the two biggest things was really the infrastructure and the data literacy to enable that to have better outcomes and to actually be used. Utility is the key word here, and that's something we've invested in.
Yeah, Joseph, I love what you're saying there. And I'll double down on a couple of points you're saying, because I think the interesting thing about generative AI, and we're all, every HR tech company right now, we're all in this generative AI space. Everyone's kind of digging in. I think the interesting thing we're finding is that it's really good at processing queries and it's really good at speaking. It's a language model. But where it really struggles is actually developing tools on the fly. So one of the things we found is that it's actually the toolkit you have is still going to be used. It's not like we're going to throw out all these stuff we've been building and just go all in on generative AI with everybody. to the cloud. The truth of the matter is the generative AIs are really good at using tools. And so some of these things that maybe we've had complicated tools in the past within our different systems, within the different world of HR tech, generative AI is going to add that natural layer where humans get to interact with it. And then that robot in the middle gets to go work with the toolkit. So we're really excited about that because I think the initial fear from everyone in HR tech was like, oh, is this going to just wipe everybody out? And what we're finding is like, you can't just hook generative AI to your data. That's not going to happen. I know a lot of HR teams might be hearing that from their C-suite or different people that are kind of hammering them to do generative AI stuff. The reality is you still need that tool in the middle to be able to perform advanced calculations, to be able to do basic stuff too, to be able to do visualizations. It's not going to make that stuff all up on its own. So having that toolkit that the generative AI works with, I think that's the path forward, which we're really excited about here at One Model.
I love that. And Richard, I'll stick with you. As you mentioned, kind of the generative AI, one of the things that we hear a lot of is just the ethics around it and ethical considerations and privacy concerns. So what are some best practices that you would recommend for maintaining ethical standards with new laws coming up and a lot more guardrails around AI?
Oh, it's a great question. And I think anytime any vendor talks about AI or generative, they need to mention ethics. And it's something I love about the people analytics space, because really, truly, all the vendors in this space come from that place that it says, hey, we're people analytics, we're not just analytics. We're there to do the ethical thing, the right thing for these people and for these people we're serving and working with. I think one of the interesting things, I mean, when it comes to standards, I'd love to give a shout out to our friends over at Insight 222. If you're looking to kind of figure out what to do, how to work with teams, how to build things within your teams, they have excellent things they've been working on for, honestly, the past decade around how to build an ethical practice within people analytics. But I think what's really top mind for me recently, we were talking about ethics with my chief data scientist recently, Taylor Clark, one of the most ethically minded people I've ever met in my life. And one of the questions he brought up was like, why is no one asking about outcomes? Because it's a really interesting thing where it's like we can be doing ethical builds and ethical algorithms and ethical, you name it along the way. But if the algorithm doesn't actually work, we're in trouble. And I think HR tech as a whole is about to go through a reconciling around that, where it's like, hey, these different things, we kind of got away with selling algorithms for a long time. But the truth of the matter is it has to work for the employee and for the purpose they're trying to build it for. And it's one of the most ethical things you can do is ensure that your algorithms work. So I think that's true for both generative as well as the kind of like traditional AI in the space, is it has to accomplish its business outcome. And if it's not able to do that and it can't prove that it can do that, that's an ethics question. It's also a business question, but there's an ethical element to that that's really critical to solve.
No, that's a really good point. Ian, Joseph, anything to add on the ethical standards?
But to double down on what Richard's saying is like you can't practice in this space without having an ethical lens, a strong statement of principle. In our world, we advocate, we guide, we cajole all our clients to have a data governance as a core part of their people analytics practice. If you're practicing people analytics and you don't have data governance, you're probably missing a really significant practice point. And we've got some guidance papers out there on how to do that. So for me, the ethics is an essential part of that data governance process, so that any new data, any new processing that data, not just can we, but should we? I mean, similar to what Richard's talking about, we have a privacy officer who looks at that specifically as we're designing the Visio product. So everything is built with that in mind, guidance to clients on, are you sure you want to do this or you don't do this? Bringing both a regulatory view as well as the, what is your business's approach to specific ways in which they handle people data. So for me, it is to again double down on what Richard's saying. It's front and center. It's always on. Our perspective is like, this is just part of the practice, and the regulatory framework, to Richard's point again, it's like the New York guidance on the use of AI in HR specifies that outcome based. Again, the regulations in the EU that have just passed into law are on that same kind of approach. We don't. I was actually talking to the head of EEOC again. He's like, there is no regulatory framework. The rules still apply if you're using AI. Like if it has bias and you cannot prove that it is not, then it is not fit for purpose. So the regulatory frameworks, again, for that stuff has been in place. It should just be a normal part of practice, but maybe it needs reinforced. I can see some of the bad actors that have happened in the past, so that may be why we need to reinforce it. But it's a given in our world.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, doubling down what Richard and Ian said, stable stakes. We think about it in 4 ways. Right? So, and I think bringing it together is, we think about it in terms of transparency. So when we talk to organizations, like, what are the best practices to make sure that you are collecting your data and using it transparency? So, hey, we're collecting this data. What are we using it for? So we've seen some really good organizations I've worked with in the past just say, hey, we're collecting this data for this reasons. And if you're not using it for, if you're using it for anything other than those reasons, that doesn't work, right? And so from the first thing, transparency is very important. Consent. So you need to obtain explicit consent from employees for data processing. So it's really important that you have that as well. Security, of course, you have to implement robust security measures because, again, you're dealing with PII and all the information. And then finally, especially around algorithmic part of it, is the validation of your algorithms, right? So really being able to really regularly check and evaluate your AI algorithms for bias and discrimination is really, really important. And also mitigating that. So almost sort of this test and learn continuously, because that's really important, because actually it affects people, their outcomes here, and you don't want the algorithms that you implement to have adverse outcomes to what you initially planned. So that's sort of how we think about it in those four sort of framework.
I love it. No, thanks for sharing. I think the trends are helpful. And I also think kind of what solutions you all have and how to make sure that you're also keeping those standards and being ethical with all the changes happening so fast is critical. And so want to switch gears a little bit. There's a lot of our listeners here that are dealing with challenges in the people analytics space. And we'll talk a little bit about this in one of our future panels, but whether it be senior leadership deprioritizing people analytics and shrinking down functions, or it being more along the lines of having trouble getting the information or providing the insights fast enough or quick enough. There's so many different challenges in the people analytics space. And so want to hear from you all some of the challenges that you're seeing, but then also solutions that you think might, or workarounds to some of these challenges. So Joseph, I'll start with you this time.
Yeah, no, for sure. There are four challenges that jump to mind when we work with people analytics teams or just companies in general. I think the first thing is data quality. I can't tell you how many times we've spoken to organizations and they're like, oh, my data is dirty. I'm like, well, if you're waiting, I think my co-founder Gabe posted something very funny on LinkedIn more recently around data quality, and you probably be waiting forever, right? Like trying to get right data quality. But one of the things around data quality we found is around it's more on a lot of cases it's really a process issue, right? And so so once you fix sort of that process, then the data quality can be rectified pretty quickly. And so with a lot of the advancements that we currently have, you're able to easily identify patterns within this vast data sets that you have. So that's one of the biggest challenges we've seen. So that issue of, and it's a mindset shift, right? Oh, like my data is dirty, I can't do anything. It's like, no, actually, you want to start with where you are, because if you don't start where you are, you can't actually implement any change over time. And so data quality is a big thing that companies deal with. But again, like I said, it's a process issue that we see. The second thing is in the integrations and data modeling. I think again, we and it's incredible the space that we're in, because we have a lot of innovation and building on top of each other, and just it's amazing to see the amount of innovation. But with that comes a certain level of just, we have a lot of vendors in the space, and so it's easy for you to talk to a company and they're using 3, 4, 5 different systems for different things. And so how do you sort of bring in all that data together and have something cohesive, so you can actually make decisions that really impact your organizations in a positive way? And so companies sort of struggle with that. Hey, like, how do I do this and do that? And so again, a lot of the vendors in the space do an amazing job in terms of creating and automating that sort of that data collection and modeling process. And I think, we'll keep seeing that evolve, because I think there's still more work to be done in this space. But that's the second thing we've seen. The third thing is the privacy and security. I don't think there's any way around this, right? So it's all companies ask about it. It goes back to privacy, security, ethics. There's all these things that come into place. And so I think certain things are in place to make sure that there are no, there isn't like bad outcomes. But again, I think each of us, we can confidently say that we're doing a lot of work in this space in terms of privacy and security. And then, of course, the fourth thing that we see we've seen is really the skill talent. And especially that shift towards really the interpretation and application of analytics insights. I think the skill sets that are needed in the space will evolve over time, right? And so I think it's important to educate people early enough in the process, and so that you can actually start to see sort of that change and shift. And so, yeah, we see that, oh, we don't have the right talent. But I feel like, yeah, so I think that that's something that we can do a lot more work in the space. But those are the 4 areas that we've seen a lot of challenges facing the people analytics space. And we see the most opportunities as well, in a sense.
Richard, Ian, you want to piggyback off of Joseph? Ian, over to you.
Sounds like I'm next. So, I mean, one of the things I would align with firmly with Joseph is this notion of automation. So we're seeing everybody's in some form of consolidation or sort of austerity budget world, and that means business isn't slowing down, and they want more answers. They don't necessarily want more data, but they want more answers from the data. So, Joseph's highlight, I think it is why the entire market is slewing towards the platform versus the build. Like Ryan Hammond recently stated on LinkedIn, do not build this from scratch yourself. Like, that's Ryan. So, I mean, yes, Richard and I and Joseph all applaud that. Similarly, if I think back 6 years, it was Visio in one model. There is now 10 vendors, all of whom are presenting as a platform. That chat is to answer the challenge of scale. It's to answer the challenge of automation. Like, we can all build our data pipeline so that you suck from multiple sources, you process through that pipe, you build your analytic model, and you allow people to hit that analytic model. We're automating that. We're breaking down the silos and structures where you need smart individuals concierging all of those pieces of data around. That world is moving away. Definitely the people who are coming to talk to us, a lot of them looked at Visio 3 years ago. It's like, no, I'll build it myself. And they're all now back at our door like, oh, we understand what you were talking about now. So the platform world is kind of becoming the stabilizing is the right way to do this. The other challenge we're seeing, which I think is important and leans into something Richard highlights, is it's sort of people data is now business data. So IT is looking over the fence going like, well, why are we letting HR manage this process? Like, shouldn't we be doing it? CHROs are getting pressure from CFOs or operations leaders. Like, I need more. My people, like, the entire reason my business is struggling because we don't know enough about our people. I need more. So I think those challenges are kind of work together where it becomes table stakes to have integrated, well-curated, cross transactional system data that you can then distribute out. And essential that the people who've got a lens on people in the business drive the bus on that. Because I think that is where the risk for either inappropriate or mistaken action really kicks in, when other functions go, well, it's just data. No, it's people data. It has to follow different rules. And if you don't do that, you potentially run into legal risk and potentially run into some bad outcomes. So I think the other challenge is just really establishing that people data is distinctive, is importantly managed by the people function. Maybe that integrates with IT, but just building that bridge and trust and credibility so you don't get steamrolled by the IT analytics engine.
Yeah, spot on. I think if I'll build on with kind of 2 areas that I think about with people analytics, like what are challenges I'm hearing from the market as we're talking to different people. I really think about access and confidence. So access, there's a lot of what Joseph was talking about, but I want to talk about kind of like there's that space between HR and IT, which to a people analytics team is, I think that's a deadly spot to be. Because really, when you're in that spot between HR and IT, neither team really knows what's going on because HR doesn't really understand that sort of architecture space. And IT doesn't care about HR half the time. I'm sorry, just that's the nature of kind of what's happening here. And so that space in the middle, that space where you have to actually build analytical tables, it's different than just like shaking Workday by its feet and getting the data out. Like, you actually have to build an analytical model to do good people analytics. It has to be time-based. It has to have all these different components, this data engineering there. I think that's where platforms can really support. That's where one model, we step into that space. We say, okay, people analytics leader, we can help you here in a really deep and robust way to make sure that you can stay visible. Because I think when they go into that spot, it's somewhere where they say, hey, what's people analytics been up to? What are they doing down there? Why don't I have my reports? I need answers. The truth of the matter is, though, you have to get that data architecture right. That has to be really, really sound. And from there, you can build and go to answers wherever you need to go. I think the other piece is really around confidence. I think ultimately, people data platforms deliver confidence to HR teams and to HR leaders. So one of the tough things about HR is that being part of HR, and I've got an HPP background, like it's HR teams are regularly undermined, underinvested, and underserved. It's incredibly tough. It's a difficult space to be. And then we get asked why we're not at the table. It's like we're not at the table because we've been deeply systematically underinvested for many years. We look around, we see all these other functions that have these tremendous analytical tools and data warehouses and investments. And HR is like, could we please get access to our data? And so I think to me, technology really represents a way for HR to leapfrog that, where we don't have to live through Lotus Notes and business objects and all these other things that kind of came before and these different technologies that everyone else kind of matured through. We could say, okay, let's start at modern and let's get up to that table. And when we get to that table, let's be there as peers. And that's when the sharing happens. That's when the kind of cross-referencing happens. But I think it's really technology is that spot where HR can go to scale and support data in a very different way. So I'm very excited about that going forward.
Yeah, it's super exciting to hear that. Like, yes, there's challenges. Yes, we're all facing similar challenges. It sounds like across the board, but there's solutions out there, and there's ways and workarounds and things that we can do to move forward. And so, want to switch gears again because as I'm thinking, as you all were talking, a lot of technology advances, a lot of things that we're learning about how organizations can support. What about the individual? So when you think about all the people analytics professionals that we have, like what are some skills, some competencies, some things that they might need to learn as technology starts to, take over some of these things? Like, or should people be worried that their technology is going to now replace their jobs, or what skills should they be focusing on to make sure that they stay relevant to the field and to the space? I actually start with you on that one.
I'm gonna jump in and do a shameless plug for my friend Ike. What has surprised me, so Visier's backend, we've been opening it out over the years. It's always our intention, but a client can now fully run their own tenant. So they can load data, they can manipulate the transformation rules, they can extend the data model, they can write their own metrics, they can fully actually run Visier for themselves. And that uses a language. So we have now got developer.com. We have a free trial. You can take yourself into a Visier instance and just actually learn how to run Visier's backend. But the fun piece for me is a guy called Neil Meister that some folks might know. Like he and I were basically adjusting his data model on the fly at HR Tech and publishing that out to his organization. So my shameless plug is you might want to learn how to run Visier because it is now open for builders. It is now extensible and modifiable. There's a skill set there. The data, it's freely available for people to learn and use. So in the same way as you would learn SQL, in the same way as you would learn, Python script or whatever, you can now learn Visier.
Yeah. I mean, that's so. I think that's such a great question because myself and my co-founders, Gabe and Ethan, we've been talking about that lately in terms of what skills do we think. And I would say it's interesting because early on in my career, I always heard it's all about the strong technical skills. And so I just focused on Python, R, and SQL just earlier on, but it's changed so much. It's changed so much over the years, and I think I can say that, and I'm sure you all can agree with me here, that it's easier to run algorithms now. I mean, there are blocks of already code in platforms and systems that you can just one click and run a regression or an OMA, or there's so many. So that's already easy. So now I think with this shift, and I think we're at a crucial time because this is something that was going to happen, but with the sort of that leap in technology over the last year, 2 years, we are seeing something that will have happened maybe 5 or 10 years from now come now, when we are at an interesting time where, again, and I mentioned earlier on, but it's a crucial shift from being just the systems of record to being the systems of decision. And that's what organizations are looking for. And so if now companies are now saying, hey, I want my analytics tools, I want my analytics tools to be a system of decision, then what skills do you need as a people analytics person? Well, there are 4 things. I always keep giving points because I think in sort of bullet points. That's sort of how my my brain works. But the first thing is the critical thinking. And it's really important for interpretation, error handling, and edge cases, because you are going to get this outcomes from, you're going to get this results from whatever tool you're using. It's easy to run those models. But how do you interpret that? How do you error handle? How do you deal with edge cases? How do you deal with outliers? So it's really important to think about, to develop those critical thinking skills. The second thing is communication. And this is very, very important because you have to be able to take these outputs from whatever tools you were using and succinctly communicate the findings and recommendations to stakeholders. Again, we talk about systems of decision, right? So you have to be able to say, hey, here are the 2, 3, 4 points that are crucial for your organization. Because again, we all talked about, my co-founder says all the time, Gabe, people data is equal to business data. Ian mentioned it now. Richard mentioned the same thing again. And so how do you communicate those findings to the organization so they can take decisions that affect the organization? So that's the second thing. The third thing is that continuous learning and adaptability. It's really important to stay informed on, okay, what are the emerging trends? And yes, you can have a healthy skepticism. And I think you need that. But I think there's a balance, right? And being able to continuously learn and see what's out there. I mean, Ian had a plug about like Vizier, right? So like, this is cool hearing about what you all have built, right? So I think just really paying attention to what's happening in the space, like, oh, what does Vizier build? What does one model build? What does Equitable? And then what is out here in the space, generative AI, all these sort of things, just understand and see how it applies to your own organization, because you need to keep learning and adapt. And then the fourth thing I would say is probably the most important skill is empathy. And it says this is especially on the technical side, because for people that build algorithms, it's important to understand that your algorithm affects real people, right? It's not just ones and zeros. And I think empathy is a skill that you can actually develop. And you can develop empathy by being open, by listening as well. And so that's something that we need as people analytics practitioners. So I think, you see, I didn't mention anything about hard technical skills, none of that. No, because I don't think that's sort of the core skills. I think what we need is those 4 things: critical thinking, communication, continuous learning and adaptability, and empathy.
Joseph, I love that, and I love empathy. I think that's a spectacular skill set for people analytics teams. There was a head of people analytics I was talking to recently who her background was in law and social work. And I thought that was the perfect background for people analytics, because that's most of our job, is how do I explain things at scale in a system that wants to fight me? And how do I drive change? And really at that people analytics leader, that's a big component, is those like soft skills really there. But I'm thinking back to when I was at Argo AI and we were looking to purchase a platform, I really wanted to find a way to de-skill my team. And that sounds like a negative thing, but the reality was I wanted to make sure I didn't have to hire data engineers, because I needed people that could do consulting and strategy, and I needed to move my resources towards consulting and strategy because that's where the gap was. And the reality is these platforms today can handle the data engineering. And it's why we went with one model, was providing that extra data engineering service. And I think in the long run, that stuff's going to just disappear further and further in the background as these data engineering platforms and data architecture platforms get better and better. And what's left for people analytics isn't the configuration. It's the, hey, I've got the insights, I've got the data, let me tell the story, let me bring that qualitative piece in. And I think this is what Joseph was getting at too. That decision science space is much broader than data. And I remember hearing recently, I think it was the NVIDIA CEO said, don't learn SQL. I think I'm done with SQL. If I need to do SQL, I can get ChatGPT to do SQL. I used to know it. I don't know it anymore. There's a bit of a half-life there. But really, it's like that's, for an HR person today, I think 5 years ago, we kept hearing learn to code, learn SQL, get really good at Excel, like dig in. The platforms are taking on more and more of that. And we should let the platforms do that so we can be HR. Because the real goal of HR and the goal of driving and decisions around workforce is not to be stuck in the data. It's to actually support the workforce. And I think despite how technical all these platforms are, that's what allows us to get there, is stand on top of that platform and go further. And so I'm really excited about that going forward.
I love that. As someone that doesn't know SQL, it's good to hear.
Yeah, put the books away. We'll have a SQL book bonfire. No, SQL is lovely. I love SQL, but it's I think those days are starting to come past. Maybe for data engineers or data scientists, you still need it, but for HR in general, double down on HR. Like let's learn what it means to be people in a ChatGPT world.
Yeah, I think that's really good. So it sounds like what people analytics professionals should focus on really are, one, learn the software, learn what's out there and learn how to use it. Two, be on the softer skills, as Joseph mentioned, focusing on the softer pieces and not always the hard stuff. And then Richard, to your point, making sure that we're focusing on how do we derive the insights. AI is not going to be able to give us some of those insights that a human can kind of look at the data and see. So that's really key. I love that.
Can I just jump in on something that everybody said, and I'll get, Joseph and Richard, please feel free to double down, but there is a product mindset. And I think this is actually an HR shift, not just a people analytics shift, where as we serve the business, we are identifying a persona, we're identifying how their behavior affects the results for people or the business, and we are targeting something very specific to that end user. Like our advanced clients are doing that. They don't have a, here's a generic dashboard for 1,000 people, we hope they find what they want. They're like, here's the head of nursing, here's the head of manufacturing, here's the head of call center, and they design very specifically a cycle with just the data needed, with just the answer needed as a product that they then operationalize out to those people. And so there's a lot that HR hasn't done in a product management. If you think about performance processes, survey data processes, where they haven't taken an end user perspective, they're taking a what do I want perspective. So this is product management is an outside in discipline. It's like, what do you need? How much of it do you need? How prepared are you to really invest and use that? And so again, I would say support fully Richard and Joseph, but just the people analytics space is moving less away from a research discipline into a analytic product delivery discipline, and that product management is core to that.
It's essentially meeting people like where they are, right? Like sort of that people data to business outcomes, right? I love that. I love that point. Thank you.
I had a follow-up question to that, but Rachel, I want to check in with you. Any questions popping up in the chat that we should address first?
Yes, I was just thinking this would be a good time to go back up to someone from LinkedIn asking, can you touch more on data literacy regarding statistical and probabilistic literacy? So I think this is kind of going back to our discussion around generative AI. So, what do you think is necessary in terms of understanding the models when you're maybe more of a layperson and you're not comfortable with confidence intervals? I think that's kind of what this person is getting at. Any thoughts on that and what you should know enough of to be comfortable in this space?
I'll jump in because I think if that's okay. Happy to stand back if others have a point of view, but I don't think you need to become a statistician. And again, if I go back into that product mindset, the product needs to communicate a confidence that you're making the right decision. Like again, Cole Napper is directionally correct. Like I love the title because people data is not engineering data. It has an automatic level of variability because a human has choice and a car doesn't. So I think you need to be able to communicate where the stats are good, bad, problem, not problem, and use stats to say, this is why I'm confident that directionally we're going in the right direction. This is why I'm not confident in using this data at all. But I don't know that we need to understand R squared numbers. Like, every user being able to interpret their own R squared. Not necessarily where we need to be, but what is a reasonable number for R squared given this context, given the data we've got behind it? That's the kind of communication I think we need. So don't need to become statisticians, but you need to be able to have a business user's capability with math.
Yeah, and it's an interesting question because I think when we think about like what data literacy means for HR, I think we've seen over the past 10 years, people have tried to say, okay, HR people, you speak language, go do math. And that's data literacy. And I think I'd like to take math and make it more HR. One of the things I always talk about when I talk to HR people is when we look at people data, it's a way to listen at scale, and you're good at listening. Like you start from a place of strength where really the HR person, like that's their job, is to listen to the organization, to understand, to bring information together. And when we talk about data is just a person hiding behind a couple numbers there, but it's a person that created that data point, whether that's survey or system or somewhere else. And as an HR person, I want to be able to listen to as many people as I can to bring that back in. And I think that sort of that conversion from, hey, data's hard, go get used to it. All of these different generative technologies are coming after that too. Because what's going to happen is how do we take that and turn that into language? Now, suddenly we have HR that speaks natural language. We have data that speaks natural language. How can we actually bring that together now where we can say as an HR person, you don't have to learn a second language here. You can speak HR. And these tools can actually bring you back what you need and translate that back in. So truly, I think, again, like statistics, let's hide that. Let's get that behind the curtain. Let's bring forward the answer. And that answer is not going to have deep stats in any sort of sense. It's going to say, hey, here's what's going on. Maybe be highly confident about it, low confidence about it. It'll use that natural language around that. And I see that happening day by day across the generative space, and I'm just cheering it on for the HR folk out there.
That's awesome.
Rachel, any other questions popping up?
I don't see any other direct questions, but there's a lot of really, I think, consensus in the chat with what has been said here, which is really great. That I think seems like we're coalescing around some big ideas, which is great. Don't learn SQL, which is great to hear. No, but I think
I'm going to set the whole field back by saying that.
Okay, we have another one that just came in. Thank you, Alona. So what is your vision for introducing people analytics to line managers? So people analytics is not only data for senior leaders. So I love this question. What do you think is the best approach for really feeding, those platforms, that platform approach down into the line managers who may not be used to seeing data in this type of way?
Yeah, I think one of the things. Yeah, I could start. One of the things is not. I would say not. If you're coming to someone and that hasn't seen it in a certain way, and you're like, here is all these things, right? Here are all this like 20 different metrics, a whole dashboard of things, it can become overwhelming. I think not just even for line managers, but for anyone else. And so I think it's starting from a place of understanding, okay, like the role of the line manager, right? And so in each particular role, so meeting them at where they are. And so here are the 2-3 important things that affect your day to day. And so I think starting with that is really, really important. And then making them understand, again, is important to, and one of the things we've done well is being able to create those definitions. So here are the 2-3 things, and here's how they are defined. So if they have any questions around what they are, they can ask those questions and get answers. But I think it's just starting with just a very simple, here's the 2-3 things you should look out for. And then what ends up happening, and what our philosophy is in our own organization, is that it's easier to edit than to create from scratch. And so when someone sees those first 2-3, they have more ideas and more questions around, oh, okay, well, what about this other metric? Or this is actually what I want to see, and then sort of go from there. And so that's what I would say, just starting with those core metrics and then sort of working with them over time to deliver that.
To build on what Joseph's saying, like that mirrors a lot of what our clients are doing. Like we've got probably some like 20% of our client group who are out to their line management population. So in one instance, that's 8,000 users hitting Vizier on a weekly basis or daily basis. And what they did mirrors what Joseph said. They didn't say, what does HR want the manager to know? They actually said, what does the manager need aligned to their business goals that will actually help them achieve those goals? So they did the connection of the data to the business outcome and then engineered back to, well, what do we share? And then as they rolled out, they educate the HR business partner, like, what are we sharing? Why are we sharing? What does it mean? How do you interpret? And then they roll out to the manager. So to Richard's point, that soft skill empathy piece of like, who's involved? How are the stakeholders going to react? How do we actually roll this out? So they were very, very intentional about what do people see? Why do they see it? How do they interpret it? Who's in the chain of communication? How do we build their cadence and comfort? And how do we operationalize? So it wasn't a fire it an email, read this, and I'm done. It wasn't that technical problem. The problem wasn't the technical problem. The problem was actually all of the engagement in the humans as to proper understanding and interpretation and use of that data. But again, their CEO is a huge fan of Vizier because they see that it's driving results across the business. And at, again, 8,000 people on a weekly basis. So not a scale you can achieve with a Power BI dashboard.
Yeah, well said, Ian. I think there's a pretty, it's a very complicated thing, but Ulrich has done a very good job making it very simple. He's got a model for HR and delivery in HR, which is kind of a four-legged stool of the employee, the manager, the organization, and the HR team. And we think about those as different audiences and stakeholders within the people analytics space. And the org leaders, I think they really care about people analytics because they can't see what's going on. They've gotten a little too far away. Their orgs are a little too big. They can't talk to everybody. They don't know what's happening. So they kind of need some way to listen. Again, that listen at scale. How do I bring that back? People analytics is the way. When it comes to managers, we've done some research when I was on one of the people analytics teams around this, where managers care about people analytics when it's important to them. And some of the interesting things there is it actually comes down to the data you have. And sometimes like demographic data is not interesting. It's like if I have 4 people on my team and one quits, 25% attrition. I know that now. Like I can do that in my head. I don't need complicated software for that. And so really it's that sort of like superpower data sets that really light up those individual managers, which are things like, let's bring in worklytics data. Let's bring in different information from the business that you might not have somewhere else. Let's surface things from kind of qualitative platforms and understand kind of like what's going on within my organization in a different way. If you can give that manager some superpowers, they're going to come back every time. And we've seen that where we have a large restaurant chain that's a customer that has one model on iPads, that all of their managers that are out there kind of across the restaurant chain are in there because it's delivering stuff they need to know on a daily basis. So I think really it's, I'll agree with Ian in there. It's like, find out what that manager needs and make sure you're delivering that. The other way around just doesn't work.
Yeah, I think that's really great insight. It's so important to connect it to business goals and the things that managers care about, but also they kind of already know. So it's great, a reminder that these platforms aren't always for every single manager in an organization. Anything else? Anything the panelists want to ask each other? We're coming up at the end of our time, and we're just so thankful to have all this participation, all this great knowledge that you guys have shared.
I did have one follow-up. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah.
I had one follow-up conversation as Ian was talking about the product management aspect, and I think like it just reminded me of how many different models of people analytics functions there is. So I was just curious of if like you all had like an ideal model of what a people analytics function should look like with the software and what that kind of looks like, or even like if you have feedback or suggestions for some of our listeners on like if putting together a people analytics function and including software with it, like what should that framework look like?
That's a great question, Stephanie, because it's a different model. It's a different organizational structure, and it's tough because we see teams come to us sometimes when they've built their structure, like a new team starts, they build their headcount, and then they say, okay, we need a platform. And it's, ooh, the platform actually does a lot of what some people on your team do. So really, as new people analytics leaders are starting, I think we are in a new era for operating models where these different platforms really provide a different way to build your team. We have a very old article on Medium now. It's very old now, but it's the platform operating model that kind of lays out a way to think about it. It's a way to think about it, though. And I think that's something I would pass on to anybody listening is people analytics is still so young. There's not a way to do it. Like, don't listen to the consulting firms. Like, figure out what works for you. Figure out what works for your company. But think with the platforms in mind, because it really gives you a leg up when you're trying to build and go to scale to start from that operating space and to start from that org design space.
And to those who are in that conversation, a couple of pieces to reinforce what Richard's saying and a couple of pieces of data. We've compared our team sizes to the average team sizes in Insight 222. Visier team sizes running Visier platforms are half the size of the average in Insight 222. We are like a 1 to 7,000 ratio. Insight 222 published a 1 to 2,900 ratio. And yet the delivery, what's being delivered and what's being pushed out, fairly equivalent in terms of impact to the business. So to Richard's point, it does really, the platform really changes the overall total cost of ownership and delivery. And whilst you probably don't need less people, I don't know any people analytics team that needs less people. So this isn't an advert for, you need less people. As we've experienced, the work is getting the data out and teaching people to use it and getting it adopted and getting people to understand it and being able to do that at precision. So it's not a lose people, it's actually change the work they do, move it into a higher value, higher, more human focused conversation, the interpretation, the deployment, the use. Let the technology do that automated pipelining piece. You'll always need people to take care of it because data's too messy in the delivery end. Like there's no way stuff goes pristine into Workday and gets to your system all the time, every day without breaking. Like humans are just not good at that consistent data entry. So you'll always need somebody over the pipeline. At the same time, the real value is in what does it mean and how do I know that and why do I trust it and how do I use it? So if you don't get use, what's the point? So you shift the resources into the getting use piece, which I think, again, increases the impact, increases the credibility, increases the likelihood of continued funding, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a really, really crux question, a great question.
Yeah, no, I love both answers from Ian and Richard. I think for me, I mean, having built people analytics teams and led people analytics teams and HR technology teams at WeWork, Snap, I really think it's varied. I think it's starting from what your expected outcomes are and essentially working backwards. Because I've seen situations where companies that are in, let's say, a rapidly changing industry, or they don't have the required resources, they have limited resources, they're going to think about things a bit differently from someone that have a lot of resources, right? So, for example, during my time at WeWork, I had an 18-person team, right? Because I was given a few $1 million to really build out a team and infrastructure. Very, very different from, from other organizations maybe I have been in, whereby I didn't have that sort of budget. So I think it's really important in terms of just starting from, okay, well, here's where we are. Here's what we can do as an organization. Here's the expected outcomes, and then work from there. In some cases, it's maybe just buying a tool and having one person run it might actually just work. In some other cases, it's a hybrid, right? It's a hybrid of tools whereby you have someone internally that does some stuff, and then you have a tool that does other things to get you where you need to go. Other times it's just outrightly building a team internally, maybe because that's what you want to do as an organization. So again, I would just say it really depends. But one thing I would add to that is saying, if there are things that have already been done, one thing I usually suggest to organizations is don't reinvent the wheel. If certain things are already built, like, hey, we want to build a certain infrastructure here, but actually we can get a thing that has already built that or done it. I would say it's better to invest in that so you can get to your required outcomes pretty quickly. And so, yeah, that's what I would say. Just start from where you are, look at the market, see what's out there, and see how you can get to your desired goals quickly and effectively with the resources that you have. So, yeah.
Love that. No, thanks for sharing. I know we only have like 2 minutes left. So with that, would like to just do a quick round of closing statements. Anything you want to add as we close, and then Rachel and I will go ahead and end the session. And really appreciate everyone joining. But Ian, I will start with you for closing statement.
Just to say, thanks for the rich debate and the chance for people to see the way and learn from the way that people are this moving forward. Passionate about the space, and a great chance to share lots of good insights. So thank you.
Awesome. Over to you, Richard.
Stephanie and Rachel, just thank you for having us all on. And just this was a delight because Ian and Joseph are two of my close friends in the space. And it was great to be on with both you guys, and just love that about the people analytics space in general. We have an incredible community both across the vendor space as well as the practitioner side. And I hope that continues.
Agree. Go ahead, Joseph.
So Stephanie and Rachel, thank you so much for this platform. This is really awesome to get Ian and Richard in the same room to chat. I would say one thing to Ian and Richard: definitely grateful for what your organizations are doing, because of course each tool is built out of a point of view, right? So we as Equitable saw what Vizier built, saw what One Model built, and we had a point of view based on what we saw, and we built something upon that. So yes, we are both all in this market and trying to get customers and grow, but at the same time, we are a city together as a people analytics community. And so it's really exciting to see what you all are doing. We are learning from you all. We are a fan of what you all are doing. And I'm just so grateful for the community as a whole. So again, I really enjoyed this conversation, and thank you so much for this.
Love that. Thanks. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Ian, Richard, Joseph. You are all friends of mine, Rachel included. I really appreciate all of you joining and having the dialogue. Rachel's put the slide up of the future panels we've got in the next coming weeks, so looking forward to it. Thanks for joining the series.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Jess.
Bye.
Bye.